Hey there, everybody. Um, Welcome back to the show, which is what I'm officially calling it. It's the show with B Renegade, with yours truly. Why B Renegade? Well, that is actually the stage name uh, that a old friend of mine came up with when I was very foolishly and very, how do you say, besides foolish, but I guess very gung ho, very just wanting to get um, to help out some friends and do something that we were doing when uh, a church that we used to attend that we did this big like concert of local Christian artists. And so as to not just go up on stage just with my name, we came up with Be Renegade. Kind of felt right, aside from the fact that, like, my tattoo and just my personality in general. So that's where we came up with the name. And I figure, you know what? It's it's a name that I've used online. Everybody's got some kind of online persona, and that's mine. And it goes to kind of highlight the the mentality that I generally tend to have, which is not a sit down yes man type of mentality, and willing willingness to buck the authority that is above me. Not in a bad way. At least I try not to do it in a bad way. I try to do it in a very respectful kind of way. But again, I'm not a yes man. I'm very much my own thinker. Sometimes, honestly, way too much of a thinker. Again, I've expressed my tendency to overthink a lot of things. So, getting back to the name and my mentality behind it is that I am rebellious by nature. That's really what it breaks down to. Um, Very much a contrarian. You say up, I say down. Trying to get a big picture. And up to this point, has it served me well for the most part? Yes, but there are definitely aspects of it that do not highlight the best in certain situations um, that I've come across or that I've experienced in my life. Kind of going back again to this past weekend, where my overthinking and my tendency to want to push against what I feel or what others may feel and how I feel uh, brings brings sometimes that undesired result. And so I definitely look at it and think, okay, what am I being rebellious for? Am I being rebellious in fighting an unjust system or in fighting an unjust cause? In which case, then yeah, that's a great time to be a rebel, right? Because then you're able to go ahead and push back against something that is not right or is not in the benefit of other people at large, at least. So there are times, though, of course, being rebellious or being a rebel is not the best thing. Uh, for instance, I know that certain aspects of me, and again, we're going back into a bit of a faith topic at this portion. So if that's not your cup of tea, then definitely um, feel free to fast forward or ignore altogether. But I believe that for me, I believe that God has called me to do certain things, and there's going to be times where I'm going to push against that just because I'm human and tend to think what that I know what is best for me. And clearly, there's been situations recently that have proven the opposite. So it's a matter of realizing, okay, when is it the right time? My tattoo, Rebel for Christ, is supposed to signify that it's doing it in a good way. It's pushing up against church leaders and in a way again that challenges them and myself to grow, because I don't ever want people to be stagnant, myself included, even though God knows that I will sit down and I will allow myself to at times be that person, right? And it's not because I want to. Again, there's aspects of my personality and my subconsciousness and consciousness that I don't necessarily like, but that's what I'm here for. I'm here to face those things and to rebel against my own negative thoughts, my own negative actions. Going on Sunday was the first day where I definitely said to myself, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be drinking. Then Monday proceeded to pour out the alcohol. Yesterday, being again at home, kind of recovering from my vacation, if you want to call it that, brought me to a place where I just could not shake again the idea of wanting to self medicate. But I was able to hold off and not do anything, not drink anything. Today was a little bit easier. And it's funny because the moment you tell yourself not to do something is usually the time that you want to do it. Again, rebellion, right? So you want to do that because you know you're not supposed to at this point. So now it's like, okay, well, the stove is hot. Let me go touch it real quick. And so having to remind myself, like, okay, my body says do this, or my mind, my psyche says do this in order to numb the pain out. Well, no, I need to make the conscious decision to rebel against that type of thought. And then learning again that that's not who I am. Who I am is not a drunken mess that makes stupid ass phone calls. And I am not the guy that gets drunk and pukes ungodly amount of times. Now, is that an action? Yeah, that was an action that I unfortunately had this past weekend. But that's the event. So now it's a matter of kind of processing through that event and what led up to that, why I did it, aside from the emotional aspects, because clearly there's going to be the emotional drive. And so knowing that I don't have to succumb to those things is great, but at the same time is difficult because you want to give in to whatever's going to be the easiest or whatever's going to give you that like that hit. The brain produces dopamine, and so that is associated with many the pleasure region of your mind. And so you're going to pursue things that cause that to elevate, whether it be love, whether it be drugs, alcohol, other forms of addiction, right? Like, I mean, even some of the healthiest things can be an addiction. Hitting the gym, having a strict routine that you will not deviate from whatsoever is a good thing. But at the same time, if you're constantly chasing that high, what is the purpose? Why are you doing it? Now, to get healthy, to be physically fit, be able to do the things that you normally would not have been able to do without being able to work out, yeah, that's great. You know, with the potential of life extension, you're able to again be available to more people for a longer period of time. So that's great. But what happens when it gets in the way? Nobody really talks about that, right? Nobody talks about when even the beneficial things get in your way, because how can you knock somebody for doing something that's good for them? Well, you can have such a strict routine that you miss out on just living life. You can miss miss the one day, right? Because you were sick or whatever it was, something happened, and now you beat yourself up in a way where you wouldn't normally do it with anything else. And so, again, moderation, right? Moderation. And until you can learn how to do that, then obviously it's going to be one of those things where you are possibly hurting yourself. And for instance, going to the gym, again, going to the gym, work out every day, you have a just an ungodly devotion to it. So um, you're gonna do what you think is best for you. But what a lot of people don't realize is that you need that recovery time. You need to be able to say, all right, you know what? My routine involves recovery time as well. And so again, it's moderation, it's balance. I was pretty well on my way to learning some of those things. Um, but I allowed myself to get distracted and pour my time and my energy and my effort into something that just never really was. And so, well, there goes the piece of paper that I had for diffusing the light. I allowed my routine to get disrupted. I allowed the distraction to take over when I was already working on a routine. I mean, I had my morning routine. I'd get up, go to the gym, and come back home, prep my food, go take a shower, get ready for work. And and so once I allowed myself to start focusing on somebody else, I wanted to be available. I was like, all right, well, cool. You know, if how how can I be available if I'm pouring my time into going to the gym or doing these other things that are beneficial to me? And so now going through this process and realizing, you know what, that clearly wasn't the healthiest option. That wasn't the healthiest choice. Anything that I'm going to pursue should, any kind of relationship that I'm going to pursue should push me to be better, not a detriment. And so looking at it that way can kind of allow me to start to let go and let live. And that's hard because, again, I am having to deal with the fact that I am going to mourn something that never was. And I say all that part in order to kind of bring myself back into yesterday and part of today. I was out there yesterday while I was here at home. Actually, I mean, not out there. Um, I wasn't out anywhere until mid afternoon. But because I was home alone, because I was focused on just trying to feel better, I reminded myself, like, hey, what was it that I was doing when before? What did my what it was my routine? Well, my routine, again, like I said, getting up and getting going to the gym, getting ready, doing all that stuff, and and finding my peace again. Excuse me, I'm pretty thirsty, so. But where where was the disconnect? Why did I allow myself to do that? I mentioned some books in the first episode. One of the ones that I'm currently focused on a little bit more is Anxiously Attached. And in that book, they have different steps that you could take in order for you to go ahead and start looking at ways that you can start to break those cycles. One portion that I started on yesterday was self reflection, identifying the core wounds within myself that ultimately gave way to a lot of the things that have happened in the past 5-6 months, I want to say, because we're in January now. Things really started to kind of go, well, shit, honestly, probably more than 5 months. The the uh, the situationship, I'll call it, really started like mid last year. So, wow, I'm bad at math. So it's actually about maybe 7-8 months of just things starting to kind of unravel in my life. And so I needed to start looking at it and figuring out why again. And through some of the stuff that I've gone through in my facing codependency support group, and then subsequently starting that back up yesterday, which was another thing, and I'll get into that. Um, Realizing that, hey, you know what? Again, I'm not going to blame other people for my actions or for my mistakes. Was that a part of who I was? Yes. Are those components still part of me? Yes. Am I choosing to give them control? I'm sure as hell trying not to, because those things are clearly not in the benefit of my overall life. So again, I look back and I'm like, all right, self-reflection. What are some of the core wounds that I have faced that led to codependency issues, but also caused me to create this anxious attachment style that I have? And one of the first and earliest things that I can remember, again, and I know that I've spoken about it at some length, um, but was knowing that my father didn't want me, and that even before that was even before learning from my mother that he actually wanted her to get rid of me. He told her to take care of it. Now, I am the product of an affair on his part. It's so funny. I always told myself growing up I never wanted to be like my father, and look what I end up doing. But that's not who I am. I'm not my father, and I don't ever want to be like him. I want to be better than him. I want to be better than anybody that had a hand in raising me. And I'm not saying that to be feel superior. What I mean is to be more self-aware, to be more conscientious of the things that I'm choosing or choosing not to do. And realizing that, hey, you know what? That rejection is a big part of what I do. Choosing to be more of a people pleaser when I don't necessarily want to, or doing the things again that I don't necessarily want to. One of the struggles that I had to come to terms with, and still pops up every so often, and it may seem trivial to some people, but growing up, I was told you're supposed to be a gentleman, you're supposed to do these things. And one of those things that I had learned was to hold open doors when entering and exiting a room or a building that otherwise would close. And through my support group, realizing that it's okay to not hold that freaking door open. I can open it, walk through, and continue my way. Why did I feel like I needed to hold it? The validation. The validation of knowing that I did something nice for you, and I'm hoping to get that hit of the thank you, the acknowledgement of saying, "Hey, you know what? You did something nice. Great." And for that split second, I would feel good. But again, when it comes to dopamine or taking any kind of substance or anything like that, you're chasing the next high, you're chasing a bigger dosage in order to feel that way longer. So of course it's going to manifest itself in a way that, you choose to do certain things to be nice or to elicit that response. And so if they thank you, then hey, maybe they'll accept you. Great. That's that's what 4-year-old me wanted. That's what 10-year-old me wanted, was to be picked and acknowledged. Then the next core wound was abandonment. It ties in again to my father. He left before I was even born. My mother married who married the man who I consider to be my dad. And he was a wonderful guy, don't get me wrong. Stubborn as all hell. I get my stubbornness from my mother's side, clearly, because I'm not his son. But you know, very few are the people that I can say can match my stubbornness. And so when she married him, he was a man that I knew to be my father, or well, to be my dad, because I equate father and dad in two different regards. A father can be a father because you're biologically the father. The light's bothering me. But a dad is a man that steps up when he doesn't have to. And that's who John was to me, at least growing up for a bit. But there was that rejection element there because he and my mother split up before I even turned, or I may have already been 1 year old, or 1 year old. And the only time I would ever see him after that was on my request. There was only one time that I could remember that he actually called to pick me up, to take me out to go do something. Any other time, I had to be the one to make the phone call, to get who I regarded as my dad to pay attention to me. So already feeling rejected and abandoned makes, a child want to do whatever it is that they have to do in order to gain that acceptance and that that excuse me, to get the acceptance and to get the love that every child should have. But again, I had to be the one to do it. And you learn that type of thing from a young age. You're going to do that until you face it, until that becomes a part of you that you're willing to face. Like I mentioned before on the first episode, you got to be willing to pick up that sword, look that demon straight in the eye, and cut that fucker's head off. I'm not going to apologize for the language that I use. I use it to emphasize it. Again, I mentioned that in the first episode. If you don't like it, you know, you don't have to be here. But you got to be willing to cut that head off so that it can no longer stare you in the face and try to intimidate you and no longer try to hold you down. And that's what I believe that I'm doing. Again, I'm looking back at the things that have unfortunately defined me, to be able to kill them, build a new definition of myself, build the healthier definition of myself. So I have that aspect, and just the two earliest men in my life. At 10 years old, my mother remarried to the man who, although emotionally unavailable, has and still is always been there for my mother and my sister. Again, not emotionally. He's not an emotional person. Again, I have to assume that that's based off of the fact that his upbringing, his family dynamic, all of that stuff plays into some kind of building of who he is. And the same with my mother. My mother, I love her. I know that she loves me. But growing up and having a single mom for a while, there are things that you miss because you don't have a father in the house. Again, I can't ever, I've told her I can't imagine what it was like to grow up in the time and in the environment that you grew up in. But it all ties back to all of that, right? It all ties back to, where did all of this start? How did it start? What caused me to deviate that way? Because people with similar traumas may become more avoidant. They become like, okay, well, you do care, or they have to fight again for the acceptance and whatnot. And then when they finally do get it, it doesn't feel normal to them, so they run. And I've had that too. I've definitely had times where that was part of the reason why I I ended up kind of folding in the attempt to salvage my marriage. Was I became the avoidant in that situation because my ex-wife loved me so much. She wanted to do whatever it is that she thought she needed to do in order to have me feel that validation that I so craved, that it scared me because I didn't know how to handle it. And part of me still doesn't, but it's the divorce has only been, God, again, October, November, December, January, 4 months. And then of course I go and I stunt my own growth by dedicating and pouring all the time and energy and the effort, all of this stuff into my situationship, because it clearly wasn't a relationship. And so going through these things and realizing that I've been both the anxious attacher and the avoidant attachment person. How do I fix that? Well, through the means that we have, right? Whatever means that we can come across. I see a therapist twice a month, and now for beginning yesterday, along with another 3 weeks where I will be attending a class of fellow people who want to work on their codependency issues. We meet up. It's a catch up group, but it's also kind of it's a workshop now. It's not just a meeting where we talk. It's more of a workshop. There's elements of having to do things in order to continue on that growth path. I'm excited for it. We were already given homework for the final week, just because they understood that, all right, you're going to need the time to get the materials and whatnot. And I'm already excited for that because we'll get to have a physical representation of unpacking all of the shit in our lives and then filling that back up with the positive aspects. So I will probably mention that at some point or another when I go into more of these episodes, just to kind of preview or kind of practice with everybody here online before I go do it in person. Coming back to the abandonment, a core wound that some people may never talk about because they associate death as maybe hurtful, but it affected a different person, right? Like that person is no longer with us. But that scar can linger. That abandonment feeling can feel very, very real. Even though it's not that person's fault, you still tend to be a little mad, whether it's at that person or, in my case, mad at God. One of my cousins, when I was 10 years old, passed away of leukemia. He was only 12. And he, being one of the closest ones in age to me, was the one that I hung out with the most because we were close in age. So we'd goof around and all that stuff, and I have seared memories in my mind of good things, and unfortunately when he passed, and knowing that he was gone, felt like I was left again. I remember crying by the bedside and wishing that it was me instead of him. What 10-year-old does that? I don't know. Maybe more than we realize, honestly. and I don't remember if it was prior. I want to say that I was actually younger, but I remembered the order a little bit differently. But my grandmother on my dad's side, and I mean my dad, not my father, passed away as well. And here's this woman that I absolutely adore and absolutely love that regarded me as her grandson, even though I wasn't biologically hers, who made sure that paid attention to me when I was there because I loved spending time at my grandmother's house. But when she passed, that was another wound that was opened because now I have by the time all this is said and done, I'm 11 years old, right? Knowing that my biological father didn't want anything to do with me, and not knowing the exact extent of it all, just because I was a child and my mother never explained all of those things because you shouldn't tell a child and traumatize them in that way. But you feel it. You feel the rejection. Then knowing again that you were abandoned, great. That adds more elements of trauma. As I got older, mind you, again, I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. And growing up in that faith can be very, very trying. There's a lot of elements of that I've discussed at great length with my family that are still in that just were and still aren't right, and definitely not conducive to a healthy family unit. At the age of 14, I was baptized as a Jehovah's Witness. And when you're baptized as a Jehovah's Witness, you become essentially an adult, even at a young age. You're expected to know all of the right from wrong and act accordingly. But what 14-year-old actually behaves the way that they're supposed to? I mean, I remember at 15 taking the car, going to visit a girlfriend, all late at night while my parents slept. And again, what teenager or what kid knows what the hell they're doing at that age? You just kind of go along and you get an idea in your head, and if you think you can do it, you're going to run with it. As you get older, that's when you get more wisdom and you realize, hey, I probably shouldn't do that. And if you never grow out of it, hey, then guess what? You're Tony Hawk, right? Because clearly you're going to do stuff that is probably not recommended for somebody your age, and hurt yourself in a different way. But growing up in that faith, growing up in that environment, I got in trouble, and in the fashion in which they handle your misdoings, you're punished. And their punishment style is to isolate you. They will push you away in order to make you feel shame and then shame you back in. Because you're going to desire to want to live the life that you had before. So therefore you're going to act in a way in order to get that back. So there's another core wound, being shamed. Now the thing that I did, honestly, if you look back now from this point, very benign. It was I was 14, 15, yeah, 14 years old, and I decided I was going to smoke weed. I think that's typical of teenagers in high school, especially when you have access to it. And so I did. And I got in trouble because, not because of anybody necessarily finding out, like, you know, catching me red-handed. My mother came across my little stash that I had that I carried in a little Altoids bin, and then proceeded to ground me. But she didn't report me. That actually happened by a, well, let's call him an acquaintance because he wasn't a friend. At that time, I thought he was a friend. But I told him, hey, I'm grounded, so I can't hang out this weekend. And when he asked me what I did, I told him because I thought he was a safe person to disclose that to. Well, then he in turn repeated that to his family. And his family then came to my mother and said, hey, you need to either confess or we'll do it for you. The shame element, right? Why why choose to do that? Because you believe that you're doing what is you're supposed to do. Again, doing the things that I feel that I'm supposed to do is because it was ingrained in me. Well, the first level of punishment was kind of a slap on the wrist. I used to do like media support, which in that church is not really media. Like media was a tape deck that with microphones and a small soundboard and stuff like that. Nothing major. Uh, I can do so much more with my phone now than you could ever have done at that period of time. And so I lost those privileges. I lost those things, and but I was still able to kind of hang out with my friends. Fast forward a few months, I get all those privileges back, and I'm back on top, right? I'm doing what I was doing before, doing all the hanging out with my friends, doing all of these things. I decided I wanted to smoke weed again because I enjoyed it at that time. Well, this time I got caught, and well, actually, I didn't get caught. A certain somebody, a significant person in my life at that time, which I'll get into that story with her. Oof. Um, but she got in trouble. I got in trouble because I was the one who provided it. Look at me, I'm a drug dealer. But because I'm the one who provided it, and this is now my second offense, I was disfellowshipped. And what that means is you're cut off. You are left out in the dark. You're only allowed to attend specific meetings. Anybody in your family that's a Jehovah's Witness is not supposed to associate themselves with you while you're disfellowshipped. And for me, that was my grandmother and my two aunts. My mother had no choice because I was still a teenager, so I'm still at home. But nobody's just supposed to discuss any of the faith driven stuff with me at all. And had I been an adult and disfellowshipped, if anybody worked with me, they can associate with me regarding work, but they cannot discuss any of the Jehovah's Witness ongoings. And as a 15-year-old kid, that's earth shattering because now your family that's devout in the faith, your friends that are in the faith, their parents that are in the faith are no longer allowed to talk to you for general set of time. At that time, I mean, I don't know how they practice their stuff anymore. I don't really give a shit, honestly. But the general time frame was anywhere between 8 months to a year, so long as you were behaving correctly in that time frame. You had to go to the meetings. You couldn't participate, which looking back at it now, thank God. But um, you're not allowed to participate. When you go to the meetings, you're the last one in the door and you're the first one out. And so having to go to the meetings because I wanted to try to get back in, I needed to be around my friends. I needed to be accepted by my family again. So I'm going to go and I'm going to grind it out so that way they can reestablish me and I'm again back on top. But you go through 8 months of that, 6, 8 months of that, where you're not able to participate, you're not able to do anything, you're not able to engage with people that you have known almost the entirety of your life. My mother started studying as a Jehovah's Witness when I was 4 years old. At this time, I'm 15. So that's 11 years. That's pretty much my whole life. So, of course, I want to get back to that. And I realized that I was going to do whatever it took to try to get that back. Well, during that time, I was also not sleeping well. And I was tired a lot. I go to the meetings and I admittedly fall asleep. However, I'm also not allowed to participate, so there's no reason for me to fully pay attention. But I'm there. I should get credit. If you show up to school, you get counted as there, and whether you do the work or not, you know, the school system itself doesn't give a shit if you do the work or not. They just care that you're there because then they get paid. And so I thought, hey, I should get the credit for this. The 6, 8 month mark rolls around. You have to write a letter that has to go up to the elders of the church and up to the the head of the headquarters or whatever. I don't want to say a lot of names because I don't want to give them any more kind of publicity. And so they review your letter, they come down with a judgment call and tell you whether or not you're going to be reestablished. And I remember going to that meeting and praying to God and asking, hey, look, if this is where I'm supposed to be, then I'm going to be here because you and I are good. They just need to realize it. And when I sat down, they told me no, that they didn't feel that I was ready. Well, needless to say, I was not pleased with that answer because I knew what I felt. I knew how much I shamefully was repentant of what I had done, and I didn't want to deal with, and I wanted to get back in again. But I was told no, which for an adult, you can, in their religion, I think, hey, if they're an adult, you're whatever. Although I don't agree with it, whatever. But an adult is an adult. They can make a little bit more logistical sense and make more rational thoughts and do what they're supposed to do. But I'm 15, 16 years old. This has been my whole life. I don't know anything else. And I am told no. you can't return to the life that you knew yet. Well, I definitely acted within character at that time. I would say out of character. No, it was within character. Told them, well, screw you guys, basically. Like, you guys aren't real. You guys aren't the right place. You guys aren't aligned with God. I'm done. I'm out. I want nothing to do with any of you. I don't give a rat's ass about the faith. I don't care that I'm losing everything because I already lost it. I already lost my life that I knew. So to be told that you're not going to get it back now, maybe another few months from now, great. So I have to isolate myself even further. I said, no, we're not doing that. I don't care. Let them have it. Walked out the door of the room that we were in, completely cast that off. But that shame stuck. Because now I am rejecting everything that I've ever been taught, everything that I've ever known. And now I have to look at the faces of the family, my blood family that wants me back in. And sees that I no longer want to be there. Now, this is my perspective. Things could have played out a little bit different. I'm sure that I'm forgetting details. But to see the 4 women that raised you all look at you as other, well, you're gonna feel shame. You're gonna feel rejection and abandonment. You're gonna feel those things, and they're gonna come even more fold. And you're 16, you don't know how to handle these things. I was an angsty teenager. Going through the breakup that I did with my ex-girlfriend in the church really brought a lot of angst out. So much so that I was a very just emotionally charged person, even at that time. I remember putting holes in walls and having a refrigerator that I dented the ever living crap out of. I want to say that no, it's not that I want to say. It's that I know I dented or I bent the door on the refrigerator with just how brutally aggressive I got with that thing. Kind of folding it in half outwards. If it wasn't for the hinge, it would have folded entirely. But again, being 16, you don't realize all of the things that you're going through. You're just feeling them, and you're trying to make sense of everything. Because everything that you know, everything that you've ever known, has now been just pulled away from you. Because you were told that you're not ready. Major scarring. All of these different little shatter points that I have had to go through and to start to realize and think to myself, what is it that has brought me to the point where I am now? Where 21 years later, I'm still dealing with the same bullshit. Not because I wanted to. I wanted to leave all that shit in the past. So much so that as I got older, I rejected a lot of the different things that I had learned there. Up until after the divorce, I didn't allow myself to really get dressed up. You're going to see me on here more regularly in a t-shirt or like a polo shirt, something along those lines. But every Friday when I do the show, it's going to be a button up because I instituted in my life months ago Feel Good Friday. Look good, feel good, right? And that's actually on honor of the Pat McAfee show. But I instituted that in my life in order to reclaim the part that growing up I was forced to do, but liked that part of me. Liked looking at myself in a nice three-piece suit with the right tie, everything, the whole nine, right? I liked looking at myself like that. But because I allowed myself to be so fucking scarred, I rejected that. I said, no, I don't want any of that. I don't want anything that's going to remind me of one of the most brutal times in my life. So I'm going to rebel against that and not dress up even when occasions call for it. If I wear a button up, I'm wearing jeans. Um, if I have to look a little bit more formal, I'm gonna do a short sleeve. I'm gonna do something other than what the normal, formal wear or um, dress wear would be, because I don't want to be reminded of what the fuck happened to me when I was 16 years old. And when I realized that I've been hiding myself from all of that, I realized that I had lost a important piece of self-esteem that I now look at myself and say, I like that. I like that part of me. I get dressed up every Friday, wear a button-up shirt. Maybe sometimes I'll wear jeans, nice good jean with a pair of boots, or wear slacks with dress shoes. Hell, even one time I went to work all black, purple tie, had to match the hair. So purple being one of my more favorite colors um and that I've developed, and that's mostly due to the fact that it's in honor of my grandmother. But I do it because I want to now. I don't have to wake up every Sunday and get dressed and drudge along and do something that I absolutely fucking hated doing. The only element that I enjoyed of doing all of those things was because I got to hang out with my friends. After church, we'd go hang out, listen to some music and hang out, play video games, do just things that kids do. Hell, I didn't even want to listen to like any kind of EDM for a long time, or any kind of stuff that I associated subconsciously with that time in my life. I Anytime I would hear it, yeah, it can be a little repetitive and some of the stuff sounds the same, but you know what? If you just want to vibe out and, not think too much about what's being said or anything like that, a lot of EDM is just music, so you're gonna vibe out to the noise. And so, but because we had listened to like techno and house and all kinds of stuff when I was younger, I didn't want to deal with that shit. I really didn't. It isn't until recently that I started to do that again. Started to find artists that I was like, oh wow, I like that. That hypes me up. That builds me up in a way that I haven't felt in years. All because of My, all because of my core wounds. How do I get to the rest of me until I recognize what has stunted me? Like the real me is in here, right? That's part of the hair, that's the piercing. Next week is a tattoo, which I'm super stoked about. But these are elements of who I am and who I enjoy seeing in the mirror. But because of all of the wounds that I've had to endure, there's other things that have happened in my life after all that stuff. But if I'm trying to go backwards and look at the little kid in me that didn't have that father figure, that didn't have the person that I needed at that time to help guide me and to give me the direction that I needed. Now I had my again, I was raised by four wonderful women. My mother, of course, had to work to support me. My aunts took care of me, but my grandmother raised me. But I didn't have that actual father figure. I have uncles in my life who I absolutely adore and love, and they treated me as if I was theirs. But it still wasn't the same. In the back of your mind, you're always going to have that nagging feeling like, yes, you love me, you take me in. One of my uncles would even go as far as to drive 5 hours out of his way to pick me up for a week or 2 weeks so I could be at his house with his family, with two of my cousins that I absolutely adore, and with my aunt. He would do that in order to help me. I lived with him when I was 18, 19 years old. Granted, it was only for 6 weeks because I wasn't allowed to keep my car. So I was like, I gotta go. But had I stayed there, I would have became a correctional officer. Whole different life, obviously, right? But I had men in my life, they just weren't my father. And I don't mean to take away from them any of that because they did what they could to help. But all of these different things that have played out in my life that have been the core wounds allowed me to just bury the shit out of who I really am. And who I really am is roughly a representation, or is represented in the way that I look. And so I'm looking forward to continuing this journey and being able to say, you know what? I'm happy with the fucking person that I am. Am I there yet? God no. There are little specks of the shine that come out through the dirt. Again, because I'm choosing to do those things, right? I'm choosing to dress up that on Fridays. I'm choosing to listen to things that I want to listen to, that I enjoy listening to. I'm doing these little things that I like doing for myself. And it's been awesome. And I'm hoping that as I go through my experiences and talk about how my journey is going, will help somebody. Help them face whatever dying ass trauma that they have, or even a wound that they didn't even realize that they had. Because shatter on a glass can be so minuscule that you very rarely notice it. I mean, imagine uh, you have on your car, a little pebble, just a little one, hits and bam, you got a nice little shatter point right there. You look at the window for the most part, kind of take a bigger picture of it, doesn't look damaged in any way. But upon further inspection, you'll see just a smidge of the glass is broken. They tell you, all right, go in and fill it in so that way it doesn't spread. Because God forbid another rock hits and really just takes that whole damn thing out. So I am encouraging everybody to look for those shatter points, to look for those little core wounds that would otherwise not be seen. Because then all it's going to do is take one bad day and there goes the whole window. There have been times in the recent this past weekend alone, there were those days that I was out in the middle of nowhere, freezing my ass off, where I was alone a lot. And I had to either choose to have a better day or not. And granted, I got hit with a pretty big rock. I didn't succumb and lose entirely. I at least was able to be like, you know what, it sucks. And I didn't act in the best way. I chose to self medicate again and then, be a complete blubbering idiot. But that's neither here or there right now because I'm already over my hour mark. Um, but I just want to encourage you to start exploring. Again, I'm doing this by myself. I'm doing this part by myself. I have the real man, real ish setup now with Drew, and that's great because we get to bounce off of each other. But we both have different lived in experiences, and so as he puts his stuff out there, great. There'll be people out there that get to relate to him because he grew up differently than I did. And so we're going to have some commonalities, but we're also going to have huge glaring differences where we won't necessarily understand one another. But it's time to do the work. I said, duh. Do the work. I recently saw that there's a podcast out there called Do the Work. So I'm not trying to take their tagline. I'm very that is what came to mind even in the first episode is just do the work. And continue to encourage you to take that sword. Again, slice that chest wide open of that demon. Pull upwards, take that head off. And continue to chop at it. Just continue to do it until that sucker is gone. And it'll take little steps. It's going to take those little steps. Like I said, I mean, I do dress up once a week. I'll listen to more of what I want to listen to, do the things that I want to do. But again, do the work. I have to remind myself every day, do the work. And if you want to talk about it or you want me to talk about it, as hopefully as the audience grows, then, drop a comment, drop a like, subscribe. Because I'm looking to try to do this more, at least 3 times a week. And so maybe I can take some of those ideas and give a different perspective, or just, tell you how I relate to it, and we can go from there. But again, this is a show with B Renegade. I hope you guys have a wonderful night.